My name is Holger Dalkmann. I'm a consultant and team lead of the Climate Compatible Growth Program. We're very pleased also that we also have a partnership with the Asian Development Bank. The Climate Compatible Growth Program is a program funded by the UK government, the Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, and is actually looking into, or is actually working on research and tools with the UK and international universities also to help also provide models, tools, research to a climate compatible growth, in particular also on energy and transport. So we have a very, very big agenda also today. So I will be try also to moderate as fast as I can. Can you go to the slide? We have in fact like 3 blocks of an agenda. We have some welcome remarks by the Asian Development Bank and also by FCDO. We will also have an interactive session on a breakout, and I will talk to you about that in a minute. And then also we'll have some presentations also at the end. So with that, I'd like to introduce Esmaya Javier. She is a climate change specialist from climate finance for the Asian Development Bank, and she speaks on behalf of Kate Hughes, who sends her apologies. So Esmaya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. I was called to this task like 30 minutes ago, but anyway, good afternoon, everyone. So on behalf of Kate, who is unable to come to be here right now, so to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, greenhouse gas emissions, or GHG, need to be reduced by 45% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050. Transport accounts for around a fourth of total energy-related carbon dioxide emissions, and without immediate action, this could rise up to 40% by 2030. Across all global regions, transport carbon emissions grew fastest in Asia. As is clear from the aforementioned numbers, decarbonization of the transport sector is one of the keys to developing or achieving global net zero emissions. However, the transport sector has limited comprehensive plans or policies that set pathways for the sector to become net zero. Also, few national climate policies, such as the Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, and the Long-Term Strategies, or LTS, provide comprehensive plans for decarbonizing the sector. Pathways are required that set out comprehensive policies, plans, investments, and operational improvements that can decarbonize the transport sector. Due to the projected rapid growth of GHG emissions from the transport sector in Asia, there is an urgent need to develop realistic, implementable pathways for decarbonization of the sector across the developing member countries of Asia and the Pacific. While transport must aim to decarbonize, it must also continue to play its vital role as an enabler for development and supporting inclusive development through providing access to job opportunities, health services, education, as well as moving goods and food. When developing low carbon strategies, cross-sector analysis and planning will be key. There is particularly a close linkage between transport and energy sectors, and any long-term planning of transport should consider the transport energy nexus for carbon dioxide reductions and full-scale decarbonization. Also, employment and other social and economic aspects should be considered to ensure a just transition to decarbonizing transport. ADB has collaborated with the Climate Compatible Growth, or CCG, program in the development of a strategic low-carbon transport energy pathway in Asia, initially through modeling work in Vietnam and Lao PDR. A second phase of the project will use the modeling outcomes to further elaborate on an approach for stakeholder engagement, leading to investable pipelines for transport decarbonization, or what is so-called data to deal approach. So in this workshop, the CCG team, the ADB Transport Group, and ADB's climate team comes together to present this work conducted so far and to provide an opportunity to participate in discussions on simulating the use of data to deal approach. So we hope for an engaging and lively discussions and that all of us leave this session with new insights gained through mutual learning. Thank you very much and a good afternoon to all.
Thank you so much, Esmara, and thanks again also to the Asian Development Bank for hosting us today. Next speaker with also introductory remarks is Elizabeth Jones. She's a Senior Transport Advisor for the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. So the floor is yours.
Thanks very much and good afternoon. So we've heard this week, and we all know, but the SDGs are quite dramatically off track. I mentioned earlier in the week, but the UK's Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, last week recommitted the UK to actually work alongside others, to try to work with others to ensure that those SDGs become more realistic and actually enable us to start to look at getting those back on track. We know that transport's a key facilitator of all of those SDGs, whether it's economically, environmentally, or socially. But if we do need to have more investment and better investment, then that means that we need to have the evidence to ensure that those investments are actually more evidence-based and actually have a greater impact. So as my ADB colleague just said, then we have had a really long-term partnership, the UK and ADB. Part of that has been on the transport sector, and some of the key engagements have been at country level engagements on specific transport programs, also on policy and research and evidence. So examples are on rural transport research, high volume transport, and obviously the climate compatible growth program that we'll be talking about today. My ADB colleague has given lots of detail about the work that the ADB and the climate compatible growth have done together. So I'll leave that to her explanation, which was fantastic. But I think something that we do need to ensure is that if we're thinking about, increased investment, which is actually what has come up again and again across this week, then we really need to make sure that those investments are really evidence-based. And so this data to deal work actually plays a crucial role there. And I think now we're going to hear a bit about the cross-sector trade-offs, the modeling, and the carbon calculators. So it'll be an exciting time for us to actually learn more about that and work together to try to make sure that those investments and the huge investments that are being made are actually as evidence-based as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liz, and thanks again also to FCDO for joining us today, but also providing also all the support to the CCG program and the partnership with ADB. With that, also I'd like to introduce you to Mark Howells. Mark is the lead of the Climate Compatible Growth Program, and he is also a professor at Loughborough University as well as Imperial College. So Mark, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Holger. Also just want to thank the ADB very much for the super productive collaboration, as well as various folk that we're working with, and the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office with whom we partner on this particular approach. We decided to shuffle the agenda around a little bit to make it way more interactive than it was going to be earlier on. And unless anybody would like to just hear lots of PowerPoint presentations and so on. So I don't see any hands for that. So to give you an idea of the flow of this afternoon session, we're going to take you through a little exercise that will hopefully make it clear how difficult it can sometimes be to do interministerial coordination. And with that, to come up with a kind of nice application for loan finance. The data to deal approach that has been developed, and you'll hear more about it later on, has been set up to try and tackle a number of key problems. Number one, it's the case that sometimes it's difficult to do that interministerial coordination. It's also the case that we want to make sure that the visioning for where the country should go, as well as the nuts and bolts for how loans are structured and engagement with IFIs is driven by the country itself, and to make sure that both sides have clear sight of what the goal is. What do you need to do in order to meet that minimum criteria for that loan release, if you're a country and you're looking at this? And what do you need to do from the point of view of an IFI? What criteria does the country have to meet? And how can you potentially engage in a way, or how can you create a value proposition that makes it sensible for the engagement to take place in the way that we'd like to do? Now, we're going to go into more detail later on, so I don't want to talk too much about that now. But I would like to say that this particular approach has been developed in Costa Rica to start off with, where it released $2.4 billion. We'll hear more about that case in a minute. It's been replicated in several other Latin American countries, releasing more finance, and we'll hear a bit about that later on. We're replicating the same in a number of African countries, and in the program that we have ongoing with the Asian Development Bank, we're doing the same in a couple of countries in the region, but very keen to try and unpack and develop something that can be rolled out at scale, which you'll hear more about a little bit later on. Anyway, the point of me coming up right now is to tell you that we've got an exciting exercise coming up, which will hopefully make sense of what we're going to go through a little bit later. So Holger, I think I'm going to pass back to yourself, and you'll introduce it.
Let's see if that works. If you could also put the presentation up as well, the first one. So I hope you're all awake. If not, so I hope we make you so awake. So this is, and as Mark also said, the main objective of the session, but particularly of this breakout is also to highlight the importance of the sectoral interaction. So between transport, between energy, between climate, and also the finance ministry. And we wanted today to share with you a little bit about the D2D concept, but I also would like to get your inputs and thoughts about how to collaborate better. And also what kind of tools, actually, what kind of information you need out of the tools, climate compatible growth program, but also others also are developing. So now I can't move forward. So we have the most rapid breakout session I've ever joined. So let's see. So here's the case study. So you, in fact, are advisors. So it's a role play. So try also to switch off whatever institutional head you have. So you are all advisors to the Ministry of Transport. And it's a fictional country, so you can also be really tough and don't have to have any political restrictions also here. So finally, your aim as transport advisors is to bring together a loan, or moving towards a loan for a national program procuring electric buses and making a case for an MDB. So your advisors, national program, electric buses. The facilitators, and we have 5 facilitators, please also stand up for a second. Thanks, there's Brandon from ADB, James, Strathclyde University, Marcella, Johanna from Consultant ADB, and Mark. And they will be ministers. So they are actually representing also later on. First, there's the Ministry of Transport. So you will discuss also like what is most important. Then also they will move around after 3 minutes. And then also say, well, I'm now the Minister of Energy. And what kind of information I actually need from you also to also like make that happen. So for example, on energy, it's like the information also to look for is in fact also how this has an impact also on the needs for future electricity in my country. So that's the 4 rounds also we have. And so we will change every 3 minutes. And please also choose at the beginning also, so you as advisors stay at the table. Please choose a rapporteur, and only the minister, so the facilitators also will change every 3 minutes. Be short, be precise, and also they will also challenge you in terms of, oh, I need more information also as a Minister of Finance, as a Minister of Climate. And then at the end of these 4 rounds, the facilitator will stay, and also you bring that together, pack that as like, okay, what kind of information and arguments I now also have for the loan, which actually gets us to then also the multilateral development bank. The rapporteur will also then also present also some key information, which we also summarize and see also how far also this exercise gets you. So ideas really is about having also a good idea about also like the wealth of information needed, but also the interministerial collaboration. So are there any questions? Mark, you want to add? So please.
So yeah, just maybe at the end, just so you know, it's the case that we'll have somebody who is working at an NDB who had to put these loads and so on together. So we're going to tell whether or not the information that you guess is most important is what was needed in a couple of other cases.
Okay, great. Okay, so if there are no questions, think about that's really a rapid session. So Mark, if you can choose your tables, let's see also that everyone please also sit around the table so there's no excuses. And if we have a table also, probably also, Johanna, can you send one person also to probably one, please join us here. Yeah, you. If that's okay. So yeah, well, it's like if you can. Okay, the 3-minute timer is already gone. So like, okay. So are all the facilitators great? Mark, if you could sit down and start the. Okay, please start. So the facilitator should also now ready with the introduction. We have just 2 minutes left. Just keep, yeah. As this is the first round, I give another 1 minute so that we also get going. What? Okay, now the facilitators move, and we are now in the round of, if we move clockwise, Johanna, if you go to Marcella, Brandon, go there. So James here, so you just clockwise. So, and we, okay. Johanna, if you going, yeah, go to that table. So now we in the round, we now in the round of the Ministry of Energy. So the Ministry of Energy is now coming to your table. Let's go. Okay, so the Minister of Energy is gone now. So, and now Emilio, so the Minister Johanna, so the Minister of Climate is now coming to your table. So the Minister of Climate and Environment is now coming to your table and discuss also the perspective there. Oh, front table don't pay attention to the minister. Okay, thank you very much. Now it's like the next round is the Ministry of Finance. So the Minister of Finance is heading to your table. Marcella? Marcella! Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. So final round of movement. Minister of Finance is coming. Okay. Okay, so the Minister of Finance is leaving, and now we have the final round where actually the facilitators can stay, James. So where you then also have Mark, the facilitators can stay. And this is now 5 minutes to really wrap up and actually make your case also towards also the multilateral development bank, bringing all the information together, but thinking already also like how to present that also later. And yeah, and the rapporteur later also should also highlight also four points also in the summary. But I come to that in a minute. So, but it's about the bottom line on the MDBs. Thank you. No, you go to the table. You discuss 5 minutes. Yeah, with your table, and then. Press start. Okay, so thank you so much. And probably also a round of applause for each of us. Also I hope that was a useful exercise. And now we're going actually. I know, sir, you want to make a photo, but only taking photos. Okay, so okay. Okay, you do wonderful. So just four brief points, and then what do you think is most important?
Okay. We're focusing on the MDBs or the entire, or for each?
Entire,
Okay, okay.
but also others have to listen and then also edit. So.
Okay. Okay. So for MDBs, our group is going to focus on the MDBs, and we discussed that we're going to do an economic analysis that is cost sectoral. But I can see you're projecting. Okay. So maybe to one point from the Minister of Transport, we are going to establish a BRT infrastructure, a bus rapid transportation, where we are going to have like 22 kilometers and like deploy like 200 buses. And the Minister of Energy, we're going to advise him to have adequate energy infrastructure, like the charging stations, and to give us a good energy mix that is focused on renewable energy. And under the Ministry of Climate, and since we have NDC targets we need to achieve, we're going to focus on emission reduction towards net zero and data collection in the various ministries in terms of transport. With the Finance Minister, there's going to be reduced revenue from fuel levies, and there's a lot of savings that comes from forex exchange, and we are going to support local manufacturing through incentivizing the sector.
Okay.
Yes, and for MDBs, we are going to.
No. Let's make 5. So sounds good. Let's be flexible.
So for MDBs, we're going to have an economic analysis that is going to be cost sectoral. We're going to have a feasibility for local manufacturing, feasibility analysis, and our business model is going to be a PPP, and the financing structure is going to be loans from the banks and some private investments. And we're also going to do a stakeholder analysis, integrating informal transport, like a just transition affair.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
So let's make sure so the others still have something to say. So that was wonderful. So round of applause. That was great. Thank you so much. Mark.
Yeah.
Please not repeat, but if that's
Sure.
already there, so bring new things in.
Yes. Okay. So we're not as specific as a BRT, but at least a bit similar. So for the Ministry of Transport, it will be responsible for conducting the baseline study and corridor selection. So a national study on number of buses that needed to be replaced and where these new e-buses could potentially be placed should come from the Ministry of Transport. And then there should be a scrapping strategy identified by the ministry for the old buses that will be replaced. For Ministry of Energy, it will be responsible, on the other hand, for providing what's the state of policies in terms of standards, battery standards, energy performance standards, also identifying the energy mix, existing energy mix, and what's the ideal energy mix for this program that will be supported by this loan program. So in hindsight, they will be identifying opportunities for investments in renewables. For Ministry of Climate, it's typically responsible for reporting the risk and mitigation targets like NDCs to the national community. So it will consolidate the information, the baseline studies, and assure that the estimates are sound based on methodologies, and report that target in this loan proposal. And then these three ministries will then coordinate with the Ministry of Finance in terms of identifying what's current existing financial instruments, what's already being done, what are the sovereign financial instruments and co-financing instruments within the ministry. Report what's the total cost of ownership and what necessary tax adjustments, tariff adjustments need to be done, and what could be the potential impact on the national coffers if there are such adjustments. This would include potential for fuel tax incentives that would also support the overall loan programs for the entry of the new electric buses. MDBs would then be responsible for setting up the loan and technical assistance product that would be in line with the program defined by the ministries. And they would also be interested in learning of the employment and revenue opportunities that would come as benefit of this overall project based on economic impact analysis. So they would require information on how many buses that they will need to invest in, the charging infrastructure, as also mentioned by the previous group. Of course, carbon reduction and mitigation results, and if it is in line with the NDC targets. But of course, there should be clear social benefits and social safeguards, social safeguards, employment impact, poverty alleviation opportunities, especially for developing member countries, and public health benefits. So yes, that's it. Thank you.
So the next table. So you start and she will add. Okay.
Okay, good afternoon. So for the Ministry of Transport, we would like to request information about climate mitigation, in particular GHG reduction for this bus project. Increase, I think the capacity increase, I think it would be the capacity of the transport system to deliver those services, including the management of operations. There's also a mention about how safe the new vehicle using this new technology, and what would be the maintenance cost. Would it be cheaper compared to the traditional bus systems? For the Ministry of Energy, very important would be the EV roadmap. So it should link to, it should identify at least the areas of infrastructure, renewable energy, and new energy sources, making sure that it's clean. What would be the partner companies and technologies that will be needed to roll out the project successfully, as well as the location. I think these are information more about how the project will be structured in terms of location of terminals, what are the endpoints, where are the depots, and of course some cost benefit analysis. For the Ministry of Climate, again, I think it relates back to GHG mitigation potential, carbon financing. So some information about that. Very important would also be data consolidation, in particular sources of energy and energy savings, as well as costs and standards, I think mentioned in the previous group as well. For the Ministry of Finance, we would like to know interest rates and what are the loan terms. What are the technology options? Are there exclusivity clauses there in the loan package? What's the absorbing capacity of government agencies that will be involved in the rollout? Arrangements and processes, I think in terms of the loan process. What are the existing resources and incentive schemes, as well as other sources of income that the government might need to access and to do the repayment? And for the MDB, what are the process and requirements again of the loan? What we would like to know, what are the exit strategy for those who will be taking up the loan package? What are the related national project and its alignment to the plans and commitments of the either NDCs and other climate targets? What are the timelines, and as well as maybe this will involve contractual design of new vehicle suppliers and OEM companies. So, and finally, social safety nets and safeguards. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's move. That's excellent. So let's move. Let's see if you still have something to add. So that's a challenge now.
Yeah. So maybe for the 4 ministries here that we've discussed with the ministers, of course, one that synergizes everything is we are trying to some sort of like restructure the current system where all the ministers are currently built in. So in terms of like restructuring the transport system, we are looking into some sort of like cross synergy between transport planning and urban planning, and basically how it would be able to provide different types of transport services on a much more equitable manner. And here we're also looking into increasing the capacity of the current workforce that we had, given that we are assuming that EVs would play an important role in the transport sector. So basically increasing their capacities and basically an overall transforming the paratransit sector. No? So in terms of the Ministry of Energy, we are also looking into a major overhaul of its current power system, given that we are also anticipating a major shift in the energy supply and also the energy demand. So one of the key areas that we are looking into is how now to optimize the share of RE and also the outgoing fossil fuel-based resources. And that leads us into proposing different studies such as grid modernization, improving our energy plan, and looking into different technologies that are emerging and that would complement a decarbonization of the overall industry. And one also vital point is, since we're also talking about possible societal impacts, is key to this one is really having a really reliable access to energy. You know? So for the Ministry of Climate, we are
maybe if you focus on 1 or 2 items.
Oh yeah, sorry for that. Yes. So for the Ministry of Climate, we are looking into having a stronger role as the GCF focal point, and then that would drive the overall contribution and realization of the long-term mitigation potentials and also the NCC updating. For the Ministry of Finance, not really my area of expertise, but over here we are also seeing major changes into the overall economic system in terms of like transforming how the exports and imports play a valuable role on how the financial system works. And then here we're also looking into possible also tax revenues. And then for the MDBs, we are looking into strengthening the institutional capacities of the formal and informal sector, and also looking into long-term investments that would contribute to the country. And one important thing here is that we are like looking into priming the Prime Minister Because in terms of like political buy-in, I think that's one of the key aspects that would drive this transition.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And now the final presentation. Let's see if you still have something to add. So it becomes a reading test, but so we can enlarge it later.
This is going to be hard. So based on our discussion, the Ministry of Transport should reconsider on how we charge the electric bus. Is it converting the current gasoline station into electric station, into electric charging station, or something else? And then on the Ministry of Energy, they have to provide us with electric tariff that is going to be charged for this project. Is it higher or lower than the normal tariffs? And then for the Ministry of Climate, we might need their suggestion about where do we plan our infrastructure so that it's going to be a free risk from the flooding or any other climate risk. And then the Ministry of Finance should approve this project. I don't know what else I have to add for the Ministry of Finance.
That's a clear instruction, yeah. Let's see how that goes with the Minister of Finance. But
and then for the MDB, I think the MDB should provide technical assistance on this project as well, and then other capacity building. I think that's it for
Thank you so much. Wonderful. So I hope you can still also read that, and you heard a lot. So we will move on very fast. But also, I just wonder if there's anything also where people feel, oh, this is information which is currently, if there's something really urgently missing, you discuss, but also it's not on the table, or something where you say, oh, I fundamentally disagree that the ministry also need that information. Is there anything? Are you all happy with also the results? And seems everyone also like to relax a little bit. So, Marcella, you worked also work for consultancy, work with the ministry, work also with the IADP. So what's your take? So is there anything also? How does it look for you?
Thank you very much. So yeah, this looks very comprehensive. I knew you were going to prepare this proposal, so we were thinking about what we really wanted to see here, and I just wanted to cross-check if what we really wanted to see here is in fact here. So just to let you know, actually, a lot of information we were expected, you totally got to it. For the Ministry of Transport perspective, we were hoping to see a lot of kind of program driven by objectives of mobility and accessibility, of cost of transportation, safety and security for transport, and also contribution to economic growth, development, equity, and social inclusion. I'm pretty sure a lot of these transformations that you define will hit some of those targets, and I heard in some of the conversations some of these elements coming up. So having like that kind of clarity was very important. For the Ministry of Energy, actually, we expected a lot of questions and conversations exactly about what you say. So what is the infrastructure need? Where? How much energy you need? Where is it going to be located? And how much this is going to impact, for example, energy prices? And it was also very interesting in a few tables how conversations started shaping about whether it was important or not that renewable energy should power the electric vehicles. And then you start seeing there, if you go to the Ministry of Climate, which was the next one, the question about, is these two already aligned to what the Ministry of Climate Change has to do? And so indeed, a lot of questions about how it links to the net zero commitment, how it links to the NDC, and whether the ministry already has sufficient information to understand that, and the commitment to be able to put it into an international document like the NDC or an LTS. and feel confident that you will be able to deliver on that. So that was touched upon in there. And for the Ministry of Finance, there were a lot of questions on the impact on how much this will cost. And in some cases, that first question was like, we're going to have to go back and do the analysis. So that was also interesting to see how that was thought about, and whether there was a clear business model, where there was a clear understanding of what were the implications for the public finances, and whether this was contributed to economic growth. And you touch in many aspects, like, for example, developing supply chains, thinking about employment. So hitting a lot of these points. And for the MDBs, it was about really having a very clear vision of what is this plan, what is the measure that you're doing, and what is this addressing, what is the problem that is addressing, and really understanding the distributional impacts, the policy, whether this is already like a joint plan with the ministries to really push this forward. So there is a clear coherence, and all the ministries are happy to sign on this with the bank. As well as the clarity that this will contribute to the bank commitment to support Paris-aligned investments more, and the sign off of the Ministry of Finance, which some of you were not quite sure whether the Ministry of Finance will be absolutely there. But I think overall, you basically touch upon a lot of these targets, and I don't know if you experienced some of these kind of maybe incoherence here and there between the ministries on making sure that the plan is actually hitting development and climate objectives, so you can actually mobilize the finance for a climate bank like the ADB. So
thank you, Marcela. Are there any final thoughts, any final word of wisdom? Maybe we should ask you. No. So with that, thanks again, Urso. I hope also the exercise was useful for you. So we want to, on purpose, also have also first as your input, so that now also we have our speakers have the challenge also to build on also what has been also discussed. So with that, I'd like to introduce again also to Mark Haltz. He's the next speaker. So Mark, as I said, is a CCG lead, and we'll briefly talk in about 8 minutes, Mark, yeah, about also the data to deal and the information can be used. So, Mark.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much, everybody, for the time and trouble taking part in this exercise. So now this data to deal approach that we've developed, I mean, it's a whole number of partners have developed this. So it's been really quite successful. So for those who weren't in a talk earlier on, in Costa Rica, which is an effort that Marcela led, they were able to mobilize $2.4 billion. In a number of other countries, similar amounts of finance and so on, and over very short periods of time too. And part of the reason for that is because of the way we could accelerate some of the communication that's needed through ministries in order to get a consolidated plan. Why are banks interested in this? Why is there this amount of finance available at the moment? Well, the urgency is there. This is our current finance spending in energy, transport, and other things that do a lot of emitting. And this is where we need to get to, right? So there's a lot more investment. Now, one of the things that was sort of touched upon, but maybe didn't come out as clearly as it could have, is that this requires more investment. Our electric buses, they're more capital intensive than their internal combustion equivalents. Renewable energy is also more capital intensive than an oil, gas, or coal-fired power plant, and so on. So they cost more. So there's more to invest. Their running costs over time are cheaper, right? So this is one of the primary reasons why we want to mobilize finance and so on. Sometimes there are constraints with respect to getting this extra finance in. But the point is that globally, we need to get a lot more finance into the system, and banks are all rising to the challenge. There is a lot of concessionary carbon finance at the moment. So this approach that we developed was in response to the fact that what we noticed, or in fact, what Marcela and the folk in Costa Rica noticed, was just that the system it's not really set up in a way that allows for this information to move together quickly and for a loan application to go forward. Often it's the case that one ministry, the transport ministry, will think this is a great idea. They'll put a transport policy in, might put lots of transport policies in, but an observation from one of the studies that was released during this week is that a surprisingly small number of NDCs are about transport. Often because what happens is as information goes from the information gets stuck in the transport ministry. They don't necessarily, that information doesn't necessarily go to the energy ministry to say we need charging infrastructure, we need new investment in renewable energy and so on. That in turn doesn't necessarily go to the climate ministry to ask for, well, what's our baseline emissions? What are the next set of emissions? We've saved so many millions of tons of carbon dioxide, and what's the cost of those two? So you don't have a cost per ton of carbon dioxide, so you can't go out to the market and so on. And then often by the time it gets to the finance ministry, they're not interested in anything that's going to reduce their tax revenue unless there are other benefits. And if those benefits aren't made clear, it will often stop. So the energy ministry is often incredibly reluctant to do anything that could make the electricity supply less reliable. So it's not going to move unless it's asked specifically. Likewise, the finance ministry is not going to move to anything that affects its taxes. And if the climate ministry doesn't know what it's supposed to go out with to these big meetings where there's all of these signals about climate finance and so on, it's just going to disappear. So that was the reason for, part of the reason for this working. There are several steps. I'm going to go through each one of these steps. The process in Costa Rica took 2 years, cost $200,000, so it's inexpensive. This can be done relatively quickly, and there are a lot of benefits to be had. One table over there got the first step absolutely right, and that is you need high-level buy-in for this to work. It's critical that there is a reason for the ministries to work together and exchange information that they don't normally exchange. There's normally some sort of high-level coordination, but this is like more technical coordination that's required for a specific purpose. So a high-level mandate is really important. Another thing that is really critical is to make sure that we're strengthening capacity in government to own the process. If you're going to be transforming the government, it's really important that there are institutions that are on top of and understand that transformation so that they can own it, right? Otherwise, externals can come in, they can have great information, do a lot of interesting stuff, but they're going to fly out. And at some point, things are going to change. So very important to make sure that there's some in-country capacity, important that it's got the right technical needs, so you can go and ask for the right stuff, and critical that the country itself can produce that capacity. So really good to engage with universities and other things. So that's capacity building. Another point, and this came up in our conversations, different ministries have all got different goals. Transport ministry, you want to provide access to transport. Energy ministry wants secure supplies of electricity to keep the lights on. Climate ministry wants reduced emissions, and so on. Finance ministry wants to balance its books. It wants to make sure the distributional income effects around the country are good. And there's always going to be compromises, right? So we have to find a way of translating information quickly to come up with a national vision. We'll show you something that we're working on in a minute with partners. Consultation is critical. I won't spend too much time on this, but the thing is that people are going to have to implement these changes. So we need to engage with the people that are going to implement the changes. People are going to be affected by the changes. So we need to engage with them to make sure that that's possible. I mean, can you come up with business models for these EVs compared to what's out there already? But a really important one is to start to involve the finance ministry and the IFI early on, okay? Because then they can kind of help guide the process, because if the finance ministry doesn't sign off, there's no loan, right? And the IFI understands what the capacity and so on, what the potential financial instruments are out there. Quantified modeling is important. Without the numbers, this is also not going to move. So often that requires better or building capacity. And then if you're going to roll this out, you're going to change none of our governments were designed for large amounts of renewable energy and electric buses. So we're going to have to change structures. We've got to think about this. Now, you can include this inside of the loans as well. So first part of the loan can be triggered by doing this analysis. The analysis might say, we've got to change the way we operate our institutions. And then finally, basically, we look at all of the individual projects, do cost benefit analysis around all of those, and wrap those up into a big finance strategy. So key takeaways. Number one, we need a credible investment case that's coherent across all of these ministries. We call this data to deal, right? That's the framework. Important that there's technical capacity locally, because these things are going to last for decades, and so it's important those are held through. Ministry of Finance is super important. It's not the case that ministries talk to each other in this kind of way all of the time in many instances. And then finally, we've got to build capacity, but it also have to be able to sustain that capacity into the future. Nobody is going to come up with a solution that fits all countries, right? So those solutions have got to be developed internally by locals. Please do feel free to download the Costa Rica case study. We have several other case studies coming through very soon. And with that, I'll end off. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark, so much on time. And as you see, also this small climate compatible growth, the website, so we get also more information around that. So moving directly also to the next presentation, and the speaker is in fact James Dixon. So nice. he's lecturer at the Strathclyde University and is co-lead of the transport team within the climate compatible growth. James.
Thank you. If I could just have my slides and then I'll start my 7 minutes. Nice. Yeah, so just building on from Mark's excellent presentation, really, I just wanted to give a few examples of where data to deal has flourished, just focusing on, I think it was point 5, which was the quantitative modeling stuff. Where do I point this? Sorry. Oh, there we go. So the goal here is, the Asian Development Transport Forum this year, we're talking about clean transport for all. Transport as a means to getting from A to B. Clean transport will look remarkably different wherever we are in the world. And this is a common goal that I think we can all share. And essentially what we're trying to do in the modeling world, I'm a transport energy modeler myself, and I wanted to dispel a few nuggets of wisdom in a totally non-technical way, is that transport is fundamentally an energy service. People don't consume energy for the sake of it, but they use it to get around. And the actual energy that is consumed is totally dependent on how in which that service is met. In the transport modeling world, this is the only equation I promise I'll show you, is the emissions is equal to the activity times the share times the intensity times the efficiency factor. The key point is that we can flex any one of these things and our overall emissions goes down. So if we want to flex A and S, the activity or the share, this is related to things like planning reform, public transport, promoting active travel. And it was really nice to see one of the groups I was with was talking about bringing in ministries of things like housing and development into the list of ministries that we omitted, because in fact, of course, they are so related to transport demand. And then the flexing the intensities in the fuel is all around, the emissions factor is all around this kind of switch to technology. So we focused on electric buses as a purely technological intervention, but of course we should also be talking about what we might be able to do about taking people out of their private vehicles, for instance, and making journeys using those buses more, let's say, affordable or appealing. So this kind of ends up in what many of you might recognize as transport enthusiasts as the avoid, shift, improve hierarchy, which sets a kind of a hierarchy of decisions to be made, where the top should be around reforming spatial planning, essentially, so that you don't have to use a private vehicle to get everywhere where you want, moving through shifting into more sustainable modes, to then finally considering improving the end use efficiency by switching to electric vehicles. So transport and silos, we deliberately teased this out in terms of 4 things, and I think everyone's picked on really well that transport needs to tell energy how many megawatt hours, how many units of energy that it needs in terms of clean energy. How much money do we need from Ministry of Finance? What are the effects on the kind of fiscal situation going to be? How much carbon dioxide is going to be resultant from this switch, or how much of a reduction are we going to get And then additionally, something that we didn't directly consider is what is the effect on jobs. It was the terms like a social safety net kept coming out. What is the impact on labor going forwards? So what can we do as kind of modelers, and key part of this data to deal paradigm is around quantifiable modeling. If you're ever into the modeling world, you'll hear this quote so many times that it almost embarrasses me to put it on a slide, but a mathematician from yesteryear, George Box, said all models are wrong, some models are useful. So modeling can quantify the likely implications of policies, and it can inform policymakers either what are the credible impacts of policy X, or what is the most sensible policies in order to achieve objective Y, and we can get the magic mushroom out of our Mario box there. So here in our data deal space, we've introduced 4 levers roughly based on the avoid, shift, improve hierarchy I showed you a few slides ago, which are all about either reducing overall travel demand, shifting to sustainable modes, improving via technology switching, and then transforming, which includes linking with the energy sector, so changing the generation mix of that electricity, or perhaps changing the blend of fuels. So, worthwhile pointing out that last one really does require interministerial transformation. So I just wanted to blast through an example of Laos PDR. It was not prepared by me, so it's a shout out to Naomi Tan and Emma Richardson, colleagues in CCG who actually did this work, and of course, Mark. But here we have transport and power, so electricity, and we have our kind of baseline business as usual trajectory for Laos PDR. And then all of our levers are at 1. We can imagine that the first one, we're going to ramp up avoid and shift. So therefore, we're going to introduce certain kind of scenarios. Say, we can reduce distance travel by 10% by 2050. We can use more efficient modes of transport. We can move from cars, motorcycles, and heavy duty vehicles to rail, and we can encourage people walking and using their bikes more. The end result is that the emissions of the transport sector have been reduced quite significantly in this particular scenario. We can't go into the exact details. The power sector is obviously unchanged because nothing has happened. This third instance, we're going to play around with the third lever. So we're going to change the improve lever. So we're going to introduce hybrid electric and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which gives us this further reductions in the transport sector. Again, the power sector has changed. Is not changed. And then the final scenario we're going to consider is where we've changed the transform lever up to level 3. So this means we're now improving the energy mix that goes into those electric vehicles. So we're showing off this kind of mutual benefits across an interministerial collaboration. And we can see not only the transport emissions going down, but also the power sector emissions going down. So this kind of overall emissions trajectory is very much linking in with what a lot of groups are talking about, and ensuring these plans are linked in hard with the NDCs, the LTSs, to start to build these collaborative things. Super quickly, this just shows the same scenarios, but this shows the capital investment trajectories. So how these things change in amongst how many electric buses are needed, whether or not we adopt certain strategies or not. So, obviously, as we talked about what the climate ministry needs to know, but also what the finance ministry needs to know. And of course, this is valuable information, and we're trying to move towards the right where we smooth out some of those spikes. So in a nutshell, data to deal is, I think what Mark already said, is this coordinated policy making between national ministries. It involves these clear policy and investment pathways towards these climate targets, making sure that projects, proposals are built with these trajectories, these objectives in mind, and then we can move towards these kind of unlocking of large sums of climate finance in achieving those targets and all those co-benefits. So that's in a nutshell, hopefully. Perfect. Screen went off. I had no idea. I was like, that's climate compatible growth. So do give us a Google if you're interested in collaborating. Get in touch. So I'm James Dixon at Strathclyde University. I think if you Google my name, got quite a common name, but you might be able to find me. But thank you, and hopefully that was interesting.
Thank you so much, James. Well done. And I hope you can stay with us. There's a couple of minutes long. We start a little bit later, so just want to give the chance also to listeners to Marcella Jahre-Miller. apologies, Ursa, how my Spanish is really terrible. So, and she is from the Pathways 2050, and will tell us a little bit more about Costa Rica, as Mark already also highlighted, also the first data to deal approach. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna start my timer as well. Right, everyone. Yeah, no, this was a really nice exercise. Thank you. Just to very quickly mention, like, who is the 2050 Pathways platform? We are a multi-stakeholder and government initiative that was created after the Paris Agreement, the following COP, to respond to the need that countries had to develop the long-term climate strategy. So they really needed to have like a big 10 of how we're gonna do this, how we're gonna do this planning, what is the knowledge about this. So we have 38 member countries from around the world, but we had the opportunity to directly support through grants or via advisory and knowledge, more than 62 countries in developing the long-term climate strategies. And we work with many different actors in the ecosystem, because what we want is to really build best practices to really capture those. So we work very closely with MDBs and with initiatives like CCG that are very aligned with what we think can really help countries move forward. And we're currently supporting 17 countries around the world on long-term planning, including Mongolia and Pakistan here in the region. So just to tell a little bit more about this. So why are we talking about these long-term strategies, this long-term planning 2050? Is because the Paris Agreement includes the request to parties to develop the long-term low greenhouse gas emissions development strategy that has a really long name. So that's what we just call them, the long-term strategies. And in many cases, they're not only about mitigation, but also they consider a lot of elements of adaptation and resilience. And also, more recently, in the COP in Glasgow, COP26 in 2021, there was also a renewed call to all countries to really present these long-term strategies. And in addition, they really asked countries to present those thinking that they should drive a transition towards just transitions to net zero emissions by around mid-century, because that's what we need in order to comply with the Paris Agreement. We all globally need to arrive to net zero emissions by around 2050. And they also ask countries to use these long-term strategies that are given the long-term vision to inform the NDCs. And so that's why many countries are working on these strategies. Right now, 72 countries have already submitted the long-term strategy. And we know that many more are working on those. In the Asia and the Pacific region, 19 countries have already submitted the long-term strategies. And these strategies are looking all sectors. Is what is the view for the whole country to transition to implement the Paris Agreement? And we know that many more countries are currently developing this. So what this means really is that we have an opportunity, since countries will need to present these plans and they need to spend time and energy on doing this. We have an opportunity to help to really make these plans effective and to really drive finance and action. So some of the elements that can make a long-term strategy something that is effective is exactly what we have been discussing today. So it's not just about GHG emission, it's also about maximizing development benefits. So why is it like, what are these transformations that we're doing gonna deliver for the country in addition to the GHG? And in the transport, like we heard a lot of your examples about economic growth, employment, etc., benefits in health, etc. Also, this is an exercise that can help you to really identify the opportunities that this transition may open to the country, as well as the barriers or the trade-offs. As you saw, many countries are also planning this transition. So you start thinking, okay, if all these other countries are going to start using these technologies and using these new practices, what would that mean for my country in this new world context? It also is a very important moment to create deeper national dialogue on climate and development. So it's the type of dialogue that we were trying to bring about today, but hopefully even with the society at large, and to really establish a roadmap. This is what is very important. Of what are the long-term goals, the medium-term goals, and even more importantly, the immediate action that will need to be moved forward from the country, from the government side. And this really helps to enable policy coherence, that is quite a strong signal to multilateral development banks, for example, because they will look into finance Paris-aligned investments. So this is a strong signal to show what are the investments that a country need to really deliver on Paris. I'm not going to go through this much in detail, but this is just an example of several countries that have submitted the strategy, what they are talking about in the strategy, and just saying that the driver for many cases, for example, in India and China, is how this transition will contribute to GDP growth, while for others is how the transition will contribute to technological innovation or to address inequalities or to create future fit jobs. So this is some of the conversations that are taking place in there. But here is the question is, okay, we're doing these strategies, how can these strategies really help unlock the finance? And here is where we work very closely with CCG, with Mark and the team about thinking about this idea of data to deal. And it's basically how through the process of a rigorous and robust process of developing a long-term strategy, we can maybe really look at the effective unlocking of finance. And with you, I'm going to share a little bit more in detail the example of Costa Rica. So Costa Rica was one of the first developing countries that submitted the long-term strategy after the Paris Agreement. And so that gave us sufficient time to already understand what happened in there. That was in 2018. And I had the opportunity to support the government at that time when I was working in the Inter-American Development Bank. So what happened in Costa Rica is that the plan really from the beginning responded to a vision that the country had, that they wanted to really achieve net zero emissions by 2050, as requested in the Paris Agreement. It came with high-level mandate. It was the president. It came into power, and he said, for the 100 days report of my job, I want to say that we're going to do this plan. So there was a high request from the government. And what happened in here is that at the time, the IDB has already been working with the University of Costa Rica to build their capacity to really model, to really analyze and understand what decarbonization means. So they were able to use all of these open data, open tools for modeling the policy, the target, the goal across all sectors, and to use this to enable a very iterative stakeholder dialogue. And it was very similar to what happened here. No? You will go and speak with different ministers and they will be like, what about this? What about that? And you really needed to very quickly show the evidence. So that was very positive in the case of Costa Rica. And through that dialogue and through that modeling, they were able to set up a roadmap, which is a very important element, that defines specific goals and measures across all sectors in the long, medium, and short term. And just to give you a very specific example, there were several measures across all sectors. One of these was transport, and for transport, there were measures for public transport. And here they defined, for example, that by 2050, they wanted to make public transport the #1 commute option, which is really not right now, and 50 and 85% of public transport to be zero emissions. So that was their goal. And they knew that to do that by 2035, they really need to at least have 30% of their buses electrics, which at that point were zero. And that means that the immediate action they needed to do in 2018 was to start updating the regulations for the bus concessions. Otherwise, they would just never meet these targets. And this was multiple of these across sectors. And then, yeah, multiple and the immediate actions that they defined included 70 public investment and policy reforms to be enacted before 2022, so by that current government. And that involved 35 different government agencies and line ministries. So today we spoke with 4 ministries. This was a really broad engagement of who is responsible for doing what, having a very clear incentive of why this will be good for the country. And at the end of the day, this was all compiled in their national decarbonization plan. And by 2022, 4 years later, Costa Rica had already secured more than 2.4 billion on international finance directly linked to this plan. And here is where, in this publication, is where we kind of studied what happened in there. And it's available for you to download it. And here just, I think I'm over time. So here were just some examples of the type of policy indicators that were used to leverage funding, particularly for policy-based loans, in this case from the IDB and the French Development Agency. And you can see here multiple ministries involved and also agencies. So RSF is the the energy price regulator. So they have some tasks to do to define the rate for fast charging stations. You also have Ministry of Energy, Environment, Transport, defining a national electric plan, fiscal incentives for the use of non-fiscal incentives for the use of electric vehicles, including the Ministry of Finance. And they were also like how to manage the fiscal implication of decarbonizing, also by the Ministry of Finance. So yeah, one size doesn't fit all. We have heard this, but there is a framework that we can all think about. This has been replicated in many countries in Latin America, and we recently did a whole analysis for the whole region. And there is data, information, and open source toolkits to do it for every country in the region. And this is something that can also be done in other regions. And yeah, what size doesn't feel all, but the very lessons learned that we captured from this case, and I have to say, working with many other countries in this type of long-term planning, this is quite applicable. So first, solid data-driven process is very important. And the most important element as well is to have that local capacity so the teams can really engage and can really understand the political issues. Can really understand the historical issues, because this is a conversation to inform national consensus. And so that local capacity is very important. Having the short, medium, and long-term objectives are also essential. And that short, immediate action with defined responsibility does make a difference. And of course, as I said, this is a whole of government approach, as you were just hearing there. And so what we found is that working closely with central planning authorities like Ministry of Finance or Ministry of Economy and Planning and Presidency can really help align many other ministries. And finally, MDBs really can be quite catalytic in this role, and MDBs can play a role from the very beginning, supporting the capacity building, the data, the tools, through defining the whole plan, through investment in policy-based loans and infrastructure. And just to note at the very end as well, it's very important to also build wider society awareness raising and institutional setup. So this is something that can live throughout political cycles. And this is, we can talk much more about that, but I just wanted to flag it there. And yeah, that was all. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thanks also for staying. I know it had been a long day, but we take that as a positive that you were interested. I know it's already sort of like over the time, but is there any final question there so you want to raise? I think everyone is tired. So with that, but the team will actually stay a little bit longer, so feel free also to approach us. Many thanks again also to the Asian Development Bank, also thanks also to also our partner. I think Brendan already facilitated left, but but thanks to Brendan, so he's outside. And yeah, so with that, I wish you a wonderful evening. Please also visit us on our website, meet us, and hopefully also we can also continue also our pathway to low carbon transport. Thank you very much. Good night.